My mother laughed when the will was read. $1. That is it. My sister waved her check for $1 million like a victory flag, but I silently gripped the bill Grandpa gave me. Their laughter died when the lawyer asked who held the legal transfer fee. I placed my dollar on the table. They realized too late that her million was a debt trap, while my single dollar purchased a billion-dollar empire. My name is Faith Treadwell, and inside the gilded cage of the Sterling Hotel, I am invisible. That is the job description, even if it is not written in the contract. To be a good concierge in a 5-star Seattle hotel means absorbing the stress of the wealthy and metabolizing it into perfect, silent service. You do not exist as a person. You exist as a solution to problems that should not exist in the first place. It was a Tuesday in November, and the rain was coming down with the kind of relentless, freezing malice that only the Pacific Northwest can muster. Outside the revolving glass doors, the city was a blur of charcoal and steel. Inside, the lobby smelled of fresh white lilies and old money. I stood behind the mahogany desk, my spine straight, my hands clasped, watching the clock tick toward 11 at night. My phone buzzed in my pocket, a sharp, angry vibration against my hip. I did not need to look to know who it was. The Treadwell family group chat had been active for the last hour. Faith, pick up. My mother's text read, Sarah is at the boutique. Her card was declined. Transfer $500. Now. Another buzz. This time from my father. Don't be selfish. Faith. It is for her brand image. You know she is building a career. I stared straight ahead, my expression unmoving. A career. Serafina was 24 years old and called herself a lifestyle influencer, which mostly meant she took photos of brunches I paid for and bought clothes she could not afford. I was the bank, the safety net, the one who had skipped college to work double shifts so the family could maintain the illusion of upper-middle-class stability. I did not transfer the money. I could not. My account balance was sitting at $42.12 until payday on Friday. The automatic doors slid open with a soft hiss, letting in a gust of damp, frigid air that cut through the perfumed warmth of the lobby. He stumbled in like a leaf blown off a dead tree. He was an old man, stooped and shivering, wrapped in a coat that looked like it had been salvaged from a dumpster 3 decades ago. His gray hair was plastered to his skull by the rain, and water pooled around his worn-out sneakers on the pristine marble floor. The reaction of the staff was immediate and practiced. The bellman, a young guy named Kevin who prided himself on spotting big tippers, wrinkled his nose and started marching toward the door. The security guard at the perimeter began to move in, his hand raised in the universal gesture for halt. At Sterling, poverty was a contagion, and they were the immune system. "Excuse me, sir," Kevin started, his voice dripping with professional disdain. "You cannot be in here. This is private property." The old man looked up. His eyes were startlingly blue, piercing through the cataracts and the exhaustion, but he looked ready to collapse. He did not argue. He just swayed slightly. I moved before I made the conscious decision to do so. I stepped out from behind the heavy barrier of my desk, my heels clicking sharply on the stone. "It is all right, Kevin," I said, my voice projecting just enough to halt the security guard. "I will handle this." Kevin looked at me like I had lost my mind. "Faith, look at him. He is dripping on the rug. Management will have our heads." "Then I will take the blame," I said quietly. I turned to the old man and offered a small, respectful bow, the same one I gave to the Saudi princes and tech billionaires who frequented the hotel. "Good evening, sir. The weather is terrible tonight. Please, come with me." The old man blinked, water dripping from his eyebrows. He looked at me with a mixture of confusion and wariness, as if waiting for the punchline. I did not wait. I gently guided him not toward the exit, but toward the VIP seating area near the massive gas fireplace. It was reserved for guests paying over $1,000 a night, but the velvet ropes meant nothing to me at that moment. I pulled out a high-backed leather armchair closer to the fire. "Please, sit. You need to warm up." He sank into the chair with a groan that sounded like his bones were grinding together. He looked terrifyingly out of place, a smudge of dirt in a pristine painting, but I turned my back to the staring staff and went to the service station. I did not bring him the complimentary water. I brewed a pot of the private reserve Earl Grey, the kind we kept for the penthouse guests. I added a slice of lemon and a small packet of raw honey, just the way my grandmother used to make it before she passed. I grabbed 2 warm towels from the spa warmer and brought everything over on a silver tray. "Here," I said, placing the tray on the low table. I handed him the warm towels first. "For your hands and face." He took them, his hands shaking. They were gnarled hands, stained with what looked like engine grease and age. He wiped his face, sighing as the warmth hit his skin. Then he picked up the china cup, the delicate porcelain looking absurdly fragile in his grip. He took a sip and closed his eyes. For a long time, he did not speak. The fire crackled. The rain lashed against the windows. I stood nearby, standing guard so Kevin would not try to escort him out again. Finally, he lowered the cup and looked at me. "You know I cannot pay for this," he said. His voice was gravelly, unused. "And I am not staying here. I do not have a room." "I know," I replied softly. "Then why?" He gestured to the fire, the tea, the towels. "Why did you not kick me out like the boy wanted to?" I looked at him, really looked at him. I saw the exhaustion etched into the lines of his face. I saw a man who had walked a long way in a storm that did not care if he lived or died. "Because it is cold outside, sir," I said, "and the cold is the most fair thing in the world. It does not care if you are rich or poor. It hurts everyone the same. No one should have to face it alone." He held my gaze for a long moment. There was something in those eyes that made me feel like I was being scanned, evaluated, and stripped bare of my uniform. It was an intense, intelligent weight that did not match his beggar appearance. "Faith," he read from my name tag. "Faith Treadwell." "Yes, sir." "A good name," he murmured. He finished the tea in silence. 10 minutes later, he stood up. He seemed stronger, the trembling in his hands gone. "I have to go. I have an appointment with destiny, I suppose." I walked him to the door. The storm was still raging. "Do you have somewhere to go?" I asked, worried. "I do now," he said cryptically. He reached into the deep pocket of his soaking wet coat. "I do not have much on me. I do not carry cash these days." "Please, sir." "It is on the house," I insisted. "Do not worry about it." He ignored me. His hand came out clutching a single, crumpled piece of paper. He pressed it into my palm and closed my fingers over it. His grip was surprisingly strong, iron hard and cold. "This is not a tip," he said, his voice dropping to a serious whisper. "This is a holding fee for the future. You kept a seat for me by the fire. I will keep a seat for you. Keep it safe. Faith Treadwell." Before I could ask what he meant, he pushed through the revolving doors and vanished into the black rain. I opened my hand. It was a $1 bill. It was old, the paper soft and almost fabric-like from years of circulation. In the corner, barely visible in the dim light, someone had written a string of numbers in faded blue ink. "Unbelievable," Kevin snorted from behind me. He had been watching the whole time. "You risk your job for that $1 congratulations. Faith, you just served the homeless for less than minimum wage. You really are a saint." I ignored him. I smoothed the bill out. It felt heavy, heavier than paper should feel. I slipped it into my pocket, right next to my buzzing phone where my mother was now sending angry emojis. My shift ended at 3 in the morning. I walked 6 blocks to the bus stop in the rain, then rode 40 minutes to a neighborhood where the streetlights were mostly broken. My apartment was a studio above a laundromat, smelling perpetually of dryer sheets and stale cooking oil. It was small, damp, and cost 60% of my paycheck. I sat on the edge of my sagging mattress and pulled out the dollar bill. Under the harsh light of my single bulb, it looked even more unremarkable. Just a piece of paper, a token from a crazy old man. I reached for the drawer in my nightstand and pulled out my notebook. It was a cheap black journal with the words, "Escape Plan," written on the first page. It was filled with calculations, budgets, and dreams of a small house with a garden, far away from my family's demands. I opened the book to a blank page and placed the dollar bill there, pressing it flat. "Holding fee," I whispered to the empty room. I closed the book. I did not know it then, but I had just closed the door on my old life. The old man was not just a guest, and that dollar was not just currency, it was a weapon, and I had just loaded the first bullet. 2 weeks passed. The rain in Seattle did not stop, and neither did the knot of anxiety in my stomach. When the text message from my mother arrived on a Thursday afternoon, it was not a question, it was a summons. "Dinner tonight, 7 sharp. Do not be late. It is important." Driving to my parents' house in Bellevue always felt like driving back into a suffocating dream I had spent 10 years trying to wake up from. Their house was a sprawling 2-story colonial, with manicured hedges and a fresh coat of eggshell paint. It projected the image of a perfect, successful American family. I parked my rusted sedan around the corner, so it would not be seen in the driveway next to my father's leased BMW and Serafina's convertible. When I walked inside, the air was thick enough to choke on. It smelled of expensive potpourri and tension. My mother, Lydia, greeted me with a cheek kiss that did not touch my skin. My father, Richard, nodded from the head of the table, his face set in a grim line, and there was Serafina, my younger sister, sitting at her usual spot, looking like a porcelain doll that had been dropped and glued back together slightly wrong. They had set the table with the good china. That was the first warning sign. We only used the gold-rimmed plates when they wanted something massive. "Sit down, Faith," my father said, gesturing to the chair opposite Serafina. "We have family business to discuss." I sat. The roast chicken in the center of the table looked dry. No one made a move to serve it. "We are so proud of you, Faith," my mother began, her voice pitching up into that fake, sweet register she reserved for bank tellers and neighbors she hated. "Working so hard at the hotel, building, character. Cut to the chase, Mom," I said, unfolding my napkin. "I have an early shift tomorrow." Serafina let out a small, theatrical sob. She covered her face with hands that displayed a fresh, $80 manicure. "Your sister is in a crisis," my father said heavily. "A business crisis." "I have an opportunity," Serafina corrected him, sniffing loudly. She looked up at me, her eyes wide and glistening. "Faith, I am launching my own skincare line. It is called CeraGlow. It is going to be huge. I have followers waiting for it. I just need a little capital to get the first batch of inventory released from the manufacturer." I stared at her. "I thought you got a small business loan last month." "That was for marketing," she said quickly. "This is for inventory. It is a guaranteed return on investment. I just need a bridge loan." "How much?" I asked. Serafina looked at our parents, then back at me. $50,000. The room went silent. I felt a laugh bubbling up in my throat. But it was not a happy laugh. It was the hysterical laughter of someone watching a car crash in slow motion. $50,000, I repeated. "Sarah, you do not have a skincare line. You have a gambling problem at those online crypto casinos. Do not look at me like that. I saw the notifications on your phone at Thanksgiving." "How dare you!" Serafina shrieked, slamming her hand on the table. "You are just jealous. You have always been jealous because I have a following and you change bedsheets for a living." "Faith," my mother snapped, her voice turning ice cold. "Apologize to your sister. We are not talking about gambling. We are talking about her future, and we are talking about you helping her." "I do not have $50,000, I said calmly. "I have $300 in my checking account." "We know you do not have cash," my father said, waving his hand dismissively. "But you have excellent credit. We checked. You have 0 debt. We need you to take out a personal loan, or perhaps co-sign a second mortgage on a property we are looking at to flip. We will service the debt, obviously. You just need to provide the signature." I looked at them. I looked at the 3 people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. They did not see a daughter or a sister. They saw a credit score. They saw a resource to be mined until it was empty. For 28 years, this had been the dynamic. When money was tight, Faith did not go to summer camp. Faith did not get braces until she was 18 and paid for them herself. Faith gave up her acceptance letter to Stanford because the family could not afford it that year. Only for Serafina to get a brand new car on her 16th birthday 6 months later. I was the draft horse. Serafina was the show pony. No, I said. The word hung in the air like a gunshot. My mother blinked, as if I had spoken in a foreign language. Excuse me? No, I said again, louder this time. I stood up, my legs shaking under the table. I will not sign for a loan. I will not give you my savings. My money is for my rent. My credit is for my life. It is not for Sarah to throw away blackjack apps or fake businesses. You selfish, ungrateful child, my father hissed, his face turning a blotchy red. After everything we have done for you, we put a roof over your head. We fed you. You did the bare minimum required by law, I shouted back, the dam finally breaking. I have been working since I was 15. I bought my own school clothes. I paid for my own community college classes. I have never asked you for a cent, and now you want me to ruin my financial future so she can pretend. She is your sister, my mother screamed, standing up to join the fray. Family helps family. If you walk out on us now, Faith, do not expect us to be there when you fail, and you will fail. You are just a glorified servant. Serafina was crying real tears now, the ugly, panicked tears of a spoiled child who is being told no for the first time. You want me to die? You want my life to be ruined so you can feel superior. I want you to grow up, I told her. I grabbed my purse. And I want you all to stop looking at me like I owe you for the privilege of breathing. If you walk out that door, my mother yelled, pointing a shaking finger at the exit, you are not our daughter anymore. Do not come back for Christmas. Do not come back when you need money. You are dead to us. I have been dead to you for years, I said. I was just waiting for you to bury me. I turned and walked out. I did not slam the door. I closed it with a soft, final click that felt more violent than any slam could have been. I drove home in a daze. My hands were trembling so hard, I had to grip the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. The rain lashed against the windshield, blurring the world into streaks of red taillights and yellow street lamps. I felt hollowed out. I had finally done it. I had cut the cord. I was free. But freedom felt terrifyingly cold. I got back to my apartment around 9 at night. The silence of the empty room was a relief. I kicked off my wet shoes and collapsed onto the sofa, not even bothering to turn on the lights. I just sat there in the dark, breathing in the smell of old dust and loneliness. Eventually, I reached for the remote and turned on the small television in the corner, just to have some noise to drown out the echo of my mother's screaming. The screen flickered to life. It was the local news channel. Breaking news. The banner at the bottom read in urgent red letters. The anchorwoman's face was somber. Tonight, Seattle mourns the loss of a titan. Reclusive billionaire and industrialist, Arthur Valmont, was found dead this afternoon in his penthouse suite at the Valmont Tower. He was 82 years old. I watched with dull interest, reaching for a glass of water. Billionaires died all the time. It had nothing to do with me. Valmont, known for his eccentric behavior and estrangement from his family, had not been seen in public for nearly a decade. The reporter continued. However, sources say he was recently spotted wandering the downtown district. A photograph appeared on the screen. It was an old file photo, taken maybe 20 years ago, of a man in a sharp tuxedo receiving an award. He looked powerful, intimidating, and vaguely familiar. Then, they cut to a more recent image, grainy footage from a security camera that had leaked online. I dropped my glass. It shattered on the floor, water soaking into the cheap carpet, but I did not move. The man in the footage was wearing a tattered coat. He was soaking wet. He was stooped over, looking at the camera with piercing, intelligent eyes. It was him. The breath left my lungs in a rush. It was the beggar from the hotel, the man I had served tea to, the man Kevin had wanted to throw out. Arthur Valmont was my grandfather. I knew the name. Of course, I knew my father was the estranged son of a rich man who had cut him off years ago, but I had never met Arthur. There were no pictures of him in our house. My parents spoke of him with venom, calling him a crazy old miser who hated happiness. I had never connected the dots. I had never imagined that the shivering, homeless-looking man I had comforted by the fire was the patriarch of the very family that had just disowned me. I scrambled off the sofa and ran to my bedroom. I tore open the nightstand drawer and grabbed my notebook. I flipped it open with shaking fingers. There it was, the single, crumpled $1 bill. I stared at it, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. The faded numbers in the corner seemed to pulse under the light. "A holding fee," he had said. My phone started ringing in the living room. Then it stopped. Then it started again. It was not just my parents. It was an unknown number, probably the press, probably lawyers. I looked at the dollar bill, and for the first time in my life, I realized I was holding something heavier than grief. I was holding a grenade, and the pin had just been pulled. 3 days after the news of Arthur Valmont's death broke, the atmosphere at the Sterling Hotel shifted. It was subtle at first, a tightening of the air, like the pressure drop before a thunderstorm. I was standing at the concierge desk, sorting through tickets for a sold-out opera, when the automatic doors slid open. Usually, guests arrive in ones or twos, dragging luggage and looking for the check-in counter. This was different. A phalanx of 6 men and women in razor-sharp black suits marched into the lobby. They moved with a synchronized, predatory grace that silenced the casual chatter of the room. At the center of the formation walked a man who looked like he owned the oxygen we were all breathing. He was tall, with silver hair swept back from a forehead etched with lines of calculated worry, and he carried a leather briefcase that probably cost more than my car. My manager, David, immediately straightened his tie and rushed out from behind the front desk, a nervous smile plastered on his face. "Good morning," David stammered. "Welcome to the Sterling. How may we assist?" The silver-haired man did not even slow down. He breezed past David as if he were a piece of furniture and stopped directly in front of my desk. The rest of the suits fanned out, creating a perimeter that separated us from the rest of the lobby. "Faith Treadwell?" the man asked. His voice was a deep baritone, smooth and authoritative. I placed the opera tickets down and met his gaze. "Yes, sir. How can I help you?" He reached into his jacket pocket and produced a thick, cream-colored envelope sealed with red wax. "My name is Elias Thorne, senior partner at Vane and Sterling. I am the executor of the estate of the late Arthur Valmont. This is for you." The lobby went dead silent. The name Valmont was currently splashed across every newspaper in the city. David's jaw dropped so low it nearly hit the marble floor. "Me?" I asked, my voice steady, despite the sudden racing of my heart. "The reading of the last will and testament will take place on Friday at 10 in the morning at the Valmont Tower," Elias said. "Your attendance is mandatory." He placed the envelope on the desk. It landed with a heavy, ominous thud. "Thank you," was all I could manage. He nodded once, a sharp, military dip of the chin, and turned to leave. Then, he paused and looked back at me. "Do not be late, Miss Treadwell. The late Mr. Valmont was quite particular about punctuality." As soon as the legal team vanished, the whispers began. My phone, which I had kept on silent in my pocket, started vibrating. It did not stop. It buzzed against my hip like an angry hornet. I waited until my break to check it. 17 missed calls, 12 text messages, all from Lydia and Richard. I listened to the first voicemail. "Faithy, darling." My mother's voice chirped through the speaker, dripping with a sugary sweetness that made my stomach turn. "We just got the most surprising letter A summons to the will reading. Can you believe it? Call us back immediately. We are so worried about you. We need to coordinate outfits. We are a family, after all, and we need to present a united front." I deleted it. The second voicemail was from my father. "Faith, pick up. We know you were contacted too. Look, about the other night. We were just stressed. You know how your mother gets. We are all grieving here. Come home for dinner. We need to discuss strategy. Strategy. That was the word that stuck. Not grief, not loss. Strategy. I opened social media and navigated to Serafina's profile. My breath hitched in my throat. She had posted a photo 10 minutes ago. It was a black and white selfie, artfully lit to show a single, perfect tear rolling down her cheek. She was wearing a black veil. The caption read, "Heartbroken to hear about the passing of my grandfather, Arthur Valmont. Even though we were kept apart by circumstances, I always felt a connection to his spirit. Rest in power. Grandpa, I will carry on your legacy. Legacy family, first heiress energy." She had never met him, not once, when he was alive. She called him the crazy old man. Now, he was content. I felt a wave of nausea. I put the phone away and went back to the floor, trying to focus on my job, but the envelope in my locker felt like it was radiating heat. Later that afternoon, as I was leaving through the employee exit near the loading dock, a black sedan pulled up to the curb. The window rolled down. It was Elias Thorne. I stopped, gripping my purse strap. "Get in, Miss Treadwell," he said. "Just for a moment." I hesitated, then opened the back door and slid onto the leather seat. It smelled of mint and expensive cologne. The partition between us and the driver was up. Elias turned to face me. The professional mask he had worn in the lobby slipped just a fraction, revealing something sharper underneath. "I have a question for you," he said, "and I need an honest answer." "Okay," I said. "Do you still have the gratuity Mr. Valmont gave you?" I froze. I had not told a soul about the dollar bill, not even the lawyers. How could he know? The gratuity. I played dumb. "The paper bill," Elias clarified, his eyes locking onto mine. "The one with the serial number ending in 459. He told me he gave it to a girl with kind eyes at the Sterling. I assume that is you." I swallowed hard. "Yes, I have it." "Good." Elias leaned forward. "Keep it. Do not spend it. Do not lose it. And most importantly, do not tell your family you have it." "Why?" I asked. "It is just $1. "It is never just $1 with Arthur," Elias said cryptically. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a photocopy of a document. "Speaking of your family, you should see this." He handed me the paper. It was a draft of a sworn affidavit, prepared by a different law firm, a cheap one my father had used for years. I scanned the text. It was a statement claiming that Richard and Lydia Treadwell had maintained constant and loving communication with Arthur Valmont over the last decade, and that they had provided him with financial support during his mental decline. It went on to claim that Serafina had been Arthur's favorite, and that he had promised her the bulk of the estate verbally before his death. At the bottom, there was a blank line for my signature. "They sent this to my office an hour ago," Elias said. "They want to file it before the reading. They claim you will corroborate their story." I laughed, a dry, bitter sound. "It is a lie, every word of it. They hated him. They barely acknowledged he was alive until they saw the news." "I know that," Elias said. "And Arthur knew that. But they are desperate. They are in debt up to their eyeballs. Miss Treadwell, they see this inheritance as their only lifeline. They will try to make you sign this. They will use guilt, threats, or bribery." He took the paper back and shredded it into a small bin in the car door. "Do not sign anything," he commanded. "Not a birthday card, not a check, and certainly not a legal document. Walk into that reading with your hands clean." "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. "You represent the estate, not me." Elias smiled, and for the first time, he looked almost fond. "Because Arthur liked you, and Arthur hated liars. I am just ensuring the playing field is level." He unlocked the doors. "Go home, Faith. Get some sleep. You are going to need your strength." I stepped out of the car and watched as the sedan merged into the rainy Seattle traffic. I stood there for a moment, the cold mist hitting my face. My phone buzzed again, a text from my father. "We are so excited to see you. We have a little surprise gift for you to sign when you come over. It will make everything easier for everyone." I looked at the text, then at the gray sky. They thought I was the weak link. They thought I was the quiet, obedient daughter who would sign her name to their lies, just to keep the peace. They thought I was alone, but I touched the pocket of my coat, feeling the outline of the notebook where the dollar bill was hidden. I was not alone. I had a secret weapon, and I had the best lawyer in the city watching my back. I typed a reply to my father, "I will see you at the tower on Friday. Do not contact me until then." Then I blocked the number. For the first time in my life, the silence that followed did not feel like loneliness. It felt like power. I walked to the bus stop, my head held high, ready to walk into the lion's den. I was done being the victim. If they wanted a fight, they were going to get into a war. Friday arrived with a rare break in the gray Seattle clouds, allowing a pale, watery sunlight to illuminate the glass monolith that was Valmont Tower. Standing at the base of the building, I felt small. It was 70 stories of steel and intimidation, a physical manifestation of the grandfather I had never truly known. I had taken the bus downtown and walked the last 3 blocks. I was wearing my best work suit, a simple charcoal affair that I kept pressed and clean for board meetings at the hotel. It was professional, nondescript, and practical. It was armor, a stretch limousine, black and gleaming like a polished beetle, pulled up to the curb just as I reached the revolving doors. I stepped back, knowing exactly who was inside before the driver even opened the door. My family did not just arrive. They made an entrance. First came my father, Richard, struggling slightly to get out of the low seat. He was wearing a tuxedo. At 10 in the morning, it was ill-fitting around the waist, straining at the buttons, but he adjusted his bow tie with the confidence of a man who believed he had already won the lottery. Then came my mother, Lydia. She was draped in a fur coat that I knew for a fact was rented from a high-end service I sometimes recommended to hotel guests. She had layered herself in enough jewelry to sink a small boat, gold chains clinking against each other with every step. But Serafina was the centerpiece. My sister stepped out of the limo as if paparazzi were waiting for her. Though the sidewalk was empty save for a few rushing office workers, she was wearing a black dress that was entirely inappropriate for a legal proceeding, tight, low-cut, and covered in sequins that caught the sun. She wore a wide-brimmed black hat with a mesh veil that covered half her face, looking less like a grieving granddaughter and more like a villain in a soap opera about merry widows. Behind her trailed a young woman I did not recognize, carrying a lint roller and a makeup bag. "Hold on," Serafina commanded, freezing in a pose. "Get a shot of me looking up at the tower, pensive, sad, but powerful." The assistant snapped 3 photos with an oversized phone. "Gorgeous. Sarah, the lighting is tragic but chic." I stood by a concrete planter, watching them. It was grotesque. It was a circus act performed on a grave. My mother spotted me first. Her smile, which had been plastered on for the imaginary cameras, vanished instantly. She marched over to me, her heels clicking aggressively on the pavement. "Faith," she hissed, looking me up and down with unmasked horror. "What on earth are you wearing?" "Clothes, mother," I said calmly. "It is a legal meeting, not a gala." "You look like the help," Lydia spat, smoothing her fur. "You look like you are here to serve the coffee, not receive an inheritance. Did you not read the group chat? We agreed on dynasty chic. You are embarrassing us. When the partners see you, they will think we raised a peasant." "The partners do not care about my pantsuit," I said, and I blocked the group chat. "You are impossible," she muttered, turning her back on me. "Just stand behind Sarah when we go in. Do not ruin the aesthetic." We entered the lobby. The security guards checked our IDs with a solemnity that made my father sweat. We were escorted to a private elevator that bypassed the 60 floors of corporate offices and shot straight to the penthouse levels. The elevator doors opened into a private library that smelled of old leather, cedarwood, and money. The walls were lined with books that reached the ceiling, accessible only by rolling ladders. In the center of the room stood a massive mahogany table that looked like it had been carved from the hull of a pirate ship. We were not the only ones there. Sitting on the plush velvet sofas along the wall were the vultures. I recognized them from the family tree diagrams my father used to obsess over. There was Cousin Marcus from the East Coast, wearing a suit that cost more than my annual salary. There was Great Aunt Beatrice, clutching a poodle and looking at everything with a jeweler's loupe. These were the distant Valmont relatives, the ones who had ignored Arthur for decades, but now swarmed the carcass hoping for a scrap. When we walked in, the room shifted. They looked at my father with disdain, the failed son, but then they looked at Serafina. "Oh, look at her," Aunt Beatrice cooed, standing up with surprising agility. The image of her grandmother, simply stunning. "Serafina, darling," Cousin Marcus said, stepping forward to kiss her hand. "I saw your post this morning. So touching. We must catch up. Valmont Capital is looking for a new face for our youth outreach program." They swarmed her. My parents beamed, basking in the reflected glory. I stood by the door, invisible once again. No one greeted me. No one offered me a seat. I was just part of the background, indistinguishable from the silent staff standing in the corners. Serafina soaked it up, nodding graciously. Then, she excused herself from her admirers and glided over to where I was standing. She lifted her veil, revealing perfectly applied waterproof mascara. "Don't feel bad, Faith," she whispered, her voice dripping with toxic sympathy. "I know this is hard for you, being the black sheep." I looked at her. "I am fine. Sarah, listen." She leaned in closer, lowering her voice. "I have been thinking, when I get the money today, and Daddy says it is going to be at least $20 million, I want to help you. I'm going to need a personal assistant. Someone to manage my schedule, book my flights, and handle the dry cleaning. You are good at that stuff, right? That is basically your job now." She paused, waiting for me to be grateful. "I will pay you $20 an hour," she added benevolently. "It is a raise, isn't it? And you can tell people you work for Valmont Enterprises. It will help your resume." I looked into her eyes and saw absolutely nothing behind them but a mirror reflecting her own ego. She genuinely thought she was being kind. She thought offering to make me her servant was an act of sisterly love. "I will keep that in mind," I said, my voice flat. "Good," she patted my arm. "Just try not to look so sour. It ruins the vibe." Before I could respond, the heavy double doors at the far end of the library opened. The room fell silent instantly. Elias Thorne walked in. He was not alone. 2 junior associates followed him, carrying stacks of files. But Elias carried the only things that mattered. In his left hand, he held a sleek black laptop. In his right hand, he carried an antique wooden box with brass fittings. He walked to the head of the table and placed the items down. He did not smile. He did not greet the cousins who were trying to catch his eye. He looked like a surgeon preparing for an amputation. "Please take your seats," Elias said. His voice was not loud, but it carried to every corner of the room. My parents scrambled for the seats closest to Elias, pulling Serafina between them. They sat up straight, posing. I took a chair at the far end of the table, near the door. The cousins filled in the middle, shooting dirty looks at my father. I watched Elias. I had spent years reading body language at the hotel, knowing when a husband was cheating, when a businessman was about to bankrupt his company, when a guest was suicidal. Elias was tense. His jaw was set tight. His hands, as he opened the wooden box, were steady but deliberate. He wasn't just a lawyer doing a job. He was a man executing a plan. He glanced at me for a fraction of a second, his eyes unreadable. Before returning his focus to the papers, he pulled 2 thick cream-colored envelopes from the box. He placed them face down on the table. My mother nudged my father. 2 envelopes, she whispered loud enough for me to hear. "One for Sarah, one for us. Faith probably gets nothing. Thank God." "We should look at that estate in Malibu again," my father whispered back, not even looking at Elias. The one with the private beach. If the payout is in stock, we can borrow against it immediately. And a new car, Serafina added under her breath. I cannot be seen in a 2-year-old Mercedes. They were already spending the money. They were mentally redecorating houses they did not own, driving cars they had not bought, living a life that was currently sitting inside a sealed paper envelope. They did not see the trap. They were too blinded by the glare of the gold they imagined. But I saw it. I saw the way Elias positioned the envelopes, like pieces on a chessboard. I saw the faint, grim satisfaction in the set of his mouth. This was not a reading, it was an ambush. Arthur Valmont was a man of specific principles, Elias began, opening the first file folder. He did not believe in traditional inheritance. He believed in value. He believed in testing the mettle of a person before entrusting them with the weight of his legacy. My father nodded vigorously. Exactly, values. Very important. Elias ignored him. I will begin by addressing the extended family. The room held its breath. I sat back in my chair, folding my hands in my lap. I felt a strange sense of calm detachedness. I touched the spot over my heart where the notebook and the dollar bill rested in the inside pocket of my jacket. Let them have their theater. Let them have their costumes and their greed. The show was about to start, and I was the only one who knew that the stage had a trap door. Elias Thorne cleared his throat, a dry, papery sound that cut through the murmurs in the library. He adjusted his wire-rimmed glasses and looked down at the document in front of him, his expression devoid of any warmth. To begin, Elias said, his voice steady. Mr. Valmont insisted that I read his preamble regarding the extended family members present today. He was quite certain that you heard his exact words. Cousin Marcus leaned forward, looking smug. Great-Aunt Beatrice stroked her poodle, expecting a windfall. Elias began to read, and it was as if my grandfather's ghost had stepped into the room, wielding a serrated knife. To my cousins, nieces, and nephews. Elias read, You are a collection of vultures who have circled my life waiting for the meat to drop from the bone. You never called to ask how I was. You only called to ask where the money was. Marcus, you are a failed investor who could not sell water in a desert. Beatrice, you are a gossip who has not spoken a kind word since 1982. I leave you absolutely nothing, not a cent, not a stock option, not even a book from this library. My legacy will not be used to fund your mediocrity. Get out. The silence that followed was absolute, terrifying, and then instantly shattered by outrage. This is an outrage, Marcus bellowed, standing up so fast his chair tipped over. He was senile. We will contest this. We will sue. You can try, Elias said calmly, closing the folder. But Mr. Valmont anticipated your litigious nature. He set aside a specific fund solely to countersue you into bankruptcy if you try. Security. The doors opened, and 4 large men in dark suits stepped in. They did not look like hotel concierges. They looked like private military contractors. There was no polite negotiation. The extended Valmont family was escorted, some dragged out of the penthouse, their screams of indignation fading as the elevator doors slid shut. And then, there were 5. Me, my parents, Serafina, and Elias. The room felt suddenly cavernous. My father, Richard, was sweating profusely, dabbing his forehead with a handkerchief. He looked terrified, realizing that if Arthur could be that cruel to the cousins, he could be equally brutal to his own son. Now, Elias said, turning his gaze to us, to the direct descendants. He reached for the first cream-colored envelope. He broke the wax seal with a sharp crack that echoed in the silence. He pulled out a single sheet of heavy watermarked paper. This section concerns Miss Serafina Treadwell, Elias announced. My sister sat up straighter, adjusting her veil. She gripped my mother's hand so hard her knuckles turned white. My mother was holding her breath, her eyes fixed on the paper as if she could pull the numbers off it by sheer force of will. Elias began to read. To Serafina, he said, You have the face of your grandmother, my beloved Eleanor. Looking at you is painful because it reminds me of the beauty I lost." Serafina let out a small, flattered gasp. My mother squeezed her shoulder, beaming. "However," Elias continued, his voice hardening, "while you wear her face, you carry the soul of your parents. You are vain. You are shallow. You measure your worth in likes and the envy of others. You have never earned $1 that you did not beg for. You are a monument to the failure of your upbringing." The smile froze on my mother's face. Serafina's mouth opened in shock. "But," Elias read on, "I am a man who believes in giving people exactly what they want, to see if they can survive it. You desire wealth without work. You desire luxury without labor. So I grant it to you. I leave to Serafina Treadwell the sum of $1 million in cash, available immediately." For a second, no one moved. The insults had stung, but the number had landed. $1 million. Then, the explosion happened. "Oh my God!" Serafina screamed, leaping out of her chair. She threw her hat onto the floor. $1 million, I knew it. I knew he loved me. "We did it," my father roared, jumping up and hugging her. "1 million. That is everything. We are rich." My mother burst into tears, loud, theatrical sobs of relief. She grabbed Serafina's face and kissed her cheeks. "My beautiful girl, you deserve it. You deserve every penny I told you he would come through for the pretty one." They danced around the table, a grotesque display of greed and joy. They completely ignored the insults Arthur had hurled at them. They would have let him call them anything as long as the check cleared. I sat perfectly still. My hands were folded in my lap. My heart was hammering against my ribs, a frantic rhythm that I fought to keep off my face. $1 million. It was a life-changing amount of money. It was freedom. It was power. And it was gone. Elias did not smile. He did not congratulate them. He simply slid a thick document across the mahogany table toward Serafina. "Miss Treadwell," Elias said, his voice cutting through their celebration, "to release the funds, you must sign this beneficiary agreement. It acknowledges receipt of the liquid assets and accepts the terms of the transfer." Serafina practically threw herself into the chair. She grabbed the gold fountain pen Elias offered. "Where do I sign?" she asked, her hand shaking with adrenaline. "Right there at the bottom," Elias said. Then, he paused. A flicker of something warning, perhaps, or just professional obligation crossed his face. "The document is quite comprehensive. It details the obligations attached to the inheritance. Would you like a moment to read it?" "Read it." Serafina laughed, a high manic sound. "It says I get $1 million. What is there to read? I am not a lawyer." "Elias, I just want my money." "Sarah, just sign it before he changes his mind," my father urged, leaning over her shoulder. "Don't waste time." "Sign it, baby," my mother encouraged. "Get what is yours." Serafina pressed the nib to the paper. She did not read a single line. She did not look at the fine print. She scribbled her signature with a flourish, underlining it twice. "Done," she announced, slamming the pen down. "When does the wire transfer hit?" "Within the hour," Elias said. He took the document back and placed it in a separate folder. He closed it with a finality that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. My mother turned to me then. Her face was flushed with victory, her eyes gleaming with malice. "Well, Faith," she said, her voice dripping with poison. "Do you see now? Do you see what happens when you are lovable? When you are special? Grandpa Arthur knew who had value in this family. He knew who the star was." $1 million, my father repeated, looking at me with a sneer. "And you are sitting there in your cheap suit, probably getting nothing. Maybe he left you a cat, or a book on how to be less boring. You should learn from this. Faith," Lydia continued, smoothing Serafina's hair. "You should learn to live in a way that makes people want to give you things. Being a martyr gets you nowhere. Being a queen gets you $1 million. I looked at them. I looked at the cruelty etched into their joy. It hurt. I cannot lie and say it did not hurt. To be erased, to be mocked, to be told by your own mother that you have no value. It felt like a physical blow, but I did not cry. I did not scream. I remembered the old man by the fire. I remembered the intelligence in his eyes. He had called Serafina greedy in the will, and she had proven him right within 10 seconds. He had called my parents failures, and they were proving it now. "Congratulations, Sarah," I said quietly. "Oh, save it," Serafina snapped. She pulled out her phone. "I don't need your jealousy." She dialed a number, putting it on speaker for everyone to hear. "Hello, Porsche of Seattle," she said loudly. "Yes, this is Serafina Treadwell. I want to order the 911 Spider, the custom one in Miami blue. Yes, full options. I will pay cash. Today, bring the paperwork to the Valmont Tower immediately." She hung up and looked at me with a triumphant smirk. "That is how you spend a Tuesday morning, Faith. Taking the bus home is going to feel really long for you today, isn't it?" Elias cleared his throat again. The sound was louder this time, sharper. "We are not finished," he said. The room quieted down, but the energy was different now. My parents were relaxed, leaning back in their chairs, confident that the main event was over and anything else was just housekeeping. "There is one more envelope," Elias said. He picked up the second envelope. It was thinner than Serafina's. "This is for Faith Treadwell," my mother scoffed. "Probably a bill for his funeral expenses. That would be fitting." I watched Elias's hands. They were careful, almost reverent. He did not break the seal with a crack this time. He peeled it open slowly. I took a deep breath, steeling myself. I told myself it didn't matter. I had my freedom. I had my job. I didn't need their money. But as Elias pulled out the contents, my heart stopped. He did not pull out a check. He did not pull out a document. He pulled out a single, crisp, brand new $1 bill. He placed it on the mahogany table and slid it toward me. It looked absurdly small against the dark wood. "To Faith," Elias read, his eyes meeting mine. "The only one who saw me when I was nobody, I leave you exactly $1. The silence held for one heartbeat, two, and then, my family started to laugh. The single-dollar bill lay on the polished mahogany table, like a punchline to a cruel joke. It was crisp, green, and perfectly flat, unlike the check for $1 million that my sister was currently waving in the air, or the thick legal documents my parents were already trying to read over her shoulder. This bill sat alone. It looked impossibly small against the vast expanse of the boardroom table. Elias Thorne did not pull his hand away immediately. He kept his fingertips on the edge of the bill, his eyes locked on mine. He was searching for something, a flinch, a tear, a scream of indignation. "I will read the accompanying note," Elias said. His voice cut through the heavy silence that had fallen over the room following the initial shock. He lifted the small card that had been in the envelope with the money. "To Faith," he read, and for the first time, his tone softened, losing that razor-sharp legal edge. "The only one who saw me when I was nobody, the only one who offered warmth when the world offered ice, I leave you exactly $1. He slid the bill across the smooth wood until it stopped directly in front of me. For 3 seconds, the room was absolutely quiet. The air conditioning hummed. The city of Seattle moved silently beyond the thick glass windows. My heart beat a slow, steady rhythm against my ribs, right where the old, crumpled dollar bill was hidden in my pocket. Then, the laughter started. It began with a snort from Serafina. It was a wet, ugly sound that she usually tried to hide, but today she let it loose. Then it grew into a giggle. And finally, it erupted into a full-blown cackle. She threw her head back, her mesh veil shaking, her hand clutching her stomach. "Oh my God," she gasped, pointing at the bill. $1, seriously, a single dollar." My father joined in, a deep, booming guffaw that shook his jowls. "That is rich. That is absolutely rich." The old man had a sense of humor after all. "It is a tip," Serafina shrieked. wiping a tear of mirth from her eye. "Don't you get it? He treated you like a help until the very end. He tipped you. Oh, Faith, that is perfect. It is poetic. You are the maid of the family, and he paid you exactly what you are worth." My mother, Lydia, was not laughing. She was shaking her head, her face twisted into a grimace of second-hand embarrassment. She looked at me not with sympathy, but with disdain, as if my humiliation was a stain on her new fur coat. "This is mortifying," she hissed. "Absolutely mortifying, Faith. I told you not to act so high and mighty. I told you that pride goes before a fall. But this is just pathetic. Imagine what the cousins will say when they find out. Arthur Valmont left his granddaughter $1. We will be the laughingstock of the club." "Don't worry, honey," my father said, leaning over to pat my arm condescendingly. "It is not all bad. You can buy yourself. What can you buy for $1 these days? A pack of gum, half a soda." "I will give her some of my change," Serafina said, still giggling. "When I cash my check, I will toss a few 20s on the floor for you to pick up. You are good at cleaning up after people, right?" The insults rained down on me like hail. They were sharp, cold, and designed to bruise. They wanted me to break. They wanted to see the stoic, boring Faith crumble into a sobbing mess. They wanted me to flip the table, scream at the lawyer, and prove that I was just as greedy and unstable as they were, but I did not move. I looked at the dollar bill. It was brand new. The serial number was consecutive, the ink dark and fresh. It smelled of the treasury. It was the sterile, clean counterpart to the dirty, sweat-stained bill the old man had given me in the hotel lobby, the only one who saw me when I was nobody. The words echoed in my mind. They were not an insult. They were a validation. My family saw the dollar as a value judgment. They thought Arthur was saying I was worth nothing, but I knew the truth. He was stripping away the noise. He was taking away the millions, the expectations, the greed, and leaving just the raw, simple connection we had shared. I reached out. My hand was steady. I saw Elias's eyes widen slightly behind his glasses. He was watching my fingers. I picked up the dollar bill. I held it by the corners, treating it with the same respect I would handle a rare manuscript. I did not crumple it. I did not throw it back at Elias. "Look at her," Serafina mocked. "She is actually keeping it. She is going to frame it and hang it in her little apartment above the laundromat." "Put it away, Faith," my mother snapped. "Stop drawing attention to it. You are embarrassing yourself." I ignored them. I looked up and met Elias Thorne's gaze. He was the only other person in the room who mattered. He was the arbiter. He was the witness. His face was impassive, but his eyes were intense. He was waiting. "Thank you, Mr. Thorne," I said. My voice was clear. It did not waver. It cut through the tail end of my father's laughter like a bell. The room went quiet again, but this time it was a confused silence. "And please," I added, looking at the empty chair at the head of the table where my grandfather would have sat, "thank Arthur for me. Tell him I understand." My father blinked, his mouth hanging open slightly. "You understand? You understand that he hated you." "She has finally lost it," Serafina whispered loud enough for everyone to hear. "The shock broke her brain. She is thanking him for insulting her." My mother sighed, a long, dramatic exhalation. "Great. Now we have a crazy daughter to deal with on top of estate planning. Faith, just stop. You are making a scene. Take your dollar and go wait in the car. We have serious financial matters to discuss with Mr. Thorne." Elias did not look at them. He did not look at the files. He kept his eyes on me. "You accept the request, Miss Treadwell?" he asked. His voice was formal, heavy with a weight I could not yet name. "I accept," I said. "And you acknowledge that this single dollar represents the entirety of the specific monetary gift allocated to you in this section of the will." "I acknowledge it," I replied. "She acknowledges she is a loser," Serafina muttered, checking her reflection in her compact mirror. "Can we move on?" "I have a car to buy," Elias nodded slowly. It was a barely perceptible movement. He reached for his gavel, a small, wooden mallet that sat on the table, and tapped it once. It was a soft sound, but it felt final. "Very well," Elias said. "The bequest is accepted." I placed the crisp dollar bill on the table, right next to my left hand. I did not put it in my purse. I let it sit there, a small green island on a sea of dark wood. My family shifted in their seats, ready to leave. My father was already reaching for his phone to call his broker. My mother was adjusting her furs, preparing to make a grand exit. Serafina was texting, her thumbs flying across the screen, telling the world about her victory. They thought it was over. They thought the story had ended with the beautiful sister getting the gold and the ugly duckling getting the crumbs. But I sat there, feeling a strange, cold fire spreading through my chest. It wasn't anger, it was clear. I touched the pocket of my jacket again, feeling the old bill, 2 halves of a whole, one from the pauper, one from the prince. I looked at my parents, who were already ignoring me, and I felt a profound sense of pity. They were so loud, so confident, so utterly blind. They were standing on a trapdoor, dancing a jig, and they had just handed me the lever. "Is there anything else, Mr. Thorne?" my father asked impatiently. "We have a celebration lunch booked at Le Bernardin." Elias looked down at the dollar bill I had placed on the table. Then he looked at the file he had not yet closed. "Actually," Elias said, "we are not quite finished." My mother groaned. "What now? Does she get a coupon for a free hug?" "No," Elias said. He took off his glasses and folded them slowly. He looked tired, but there was a spark in his eyes that had not been there before. It was the look of a man who was about to drop a guillotine. "We have established the distribution of assets," Elias said. "Now, we must discuss the matter of the counter-assets." "Counter-assets," my father frowned. "I don't know that legal term." "It is a term unique to Mr. Valmont's estate planning," Elias said. He turned his chair slightly so he was facing me directly, turning his back on my parents and Serafina. "Miss Treadwell," Elias asked, and the air in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "I have a question for you." My family rolled their eyes. Serafina let out a loud groan, but I sat up straight. I knew, somehow, in my bones, I knew. The game was just beginning. My father was already buttoning his tuxedo jacket, the fabric straining against his midsection, while my mother made a show of checking her diamond watch. They were done with this room. They were done with the smell of old books and the uncomfortable reminder of my existence. Serafina was standing by the door, tapping her foot impatiently, her $1 million check tucked securely into her designer clutch. "Come on, Faith," my father called out over his shoulder, not bothering to look at me. "Do not dawdle. We have reservations, and I am not missing the appetizers because you are staring at a dollar bill." "Actually," Elias Thorne's voice rang out, sharp and commanding. It was followed by the crack of his gavel against the wooden striking block. It was a sound usually reserved for courtrooms. In the quiet of the penthouse library, it sounded like a gunshot. "Sit down, all of you. We are not finished." My father froze. "Excuse me. We have the check. The will is read. What else could there possibly be?" "Please take your seats," Elias repeated. He was not asking. He was ordering. Reluctantly. My parents sank back into their chairs. Serafina huffed, rolling her eyes so hard I thought they might get stuck, and flopped back into her seat. "This is ridiculous," she muttered. "What, does she get a coupon for a free hug too? Can we speed this up?" Elias ignored them entirely. He turned his body so he was facing me squarely. The air in the room seemed to shift, becoming heavier, charged with a static electricity that made the hair on my arms stand up. He looked at me not as a concierge or a poor relation, but as a partner in a high-stakes game. "Miss Treadwell," Elias said, his voice dropping to a register of absolute seriousness, "I have a question of significant legal import. Do you currently have in your possession the counterpart bill that Mr. Arthur Valmont entrusted to you on the night of November 12th? The room went deadly silent. My mother frowned. confusion wrinkling her Botoxed forehead. Counterpart bill. What is he talking about? Faith, my father asked, looking at me with suspicion. What is this? I did not look at them. I reached into the inside pocket of my blazer. My fingers brushed against the worn cover of my escape plan notebook. I slid the notebook out, opened it to the first page, and carefully peeled the old, crumpled dollar bill from where I had pressed it flat. It was gray with age, soft as fabric, and stained with the grime of the city. I laid it on the mahogany table. I placed it directly next to the crisp, brand-new dollar bill that Elias had given me moments ago. The contrast was striking. One was pristine, cold, and impersonal. The other was battered, warm, and carried the weight of a human hand. I have it, I said. Elias nodded, a flicker of satisfaction crossing his face. Excellent. Now, Miss Treadwell, pay close attention. Under Clause 10 of the last will and testament of Arthur Valmont, the possession of this specific counterpart bill, identified by the serial number ending in 459, grants the bearer a specific contractual right. He paused, letting the words hang in the air. Do you, Faith Treadwell, accept the use of the capital bill? He pointed to the new dollar. To exercise your option to purchase as defined by the agreement inherent in the counterpart bill. He pointed to the old dollar. My family was staring at us like we were speaking a foreign language. They did not understand. They saw two pieces of paper. They did not see the trap shutting around them, but I saw it. I understood instantly what Arthur had done. The holding fee wasn't just a fee to hold a seat by the fire. It was a fee to hold the right to buy. I accept, I said. My voice was steady, louder than I expected. Wait, my father interrupted, waving his hands. Option to purchase what? It is $1. For God's sake. What is she buying? A vending machine soda. Elias ignored him. He opened a new file, one that had been sitting under the others the entire time. It was thick, bound in leather, with gold lettering on the front. By combining the deposit, Elias tapped the old dirty bill with the capital. He tapped the new crisp bill. You have satisfied the consideration requirement for a binding buy-sell agreement. The two bills are the key and the lock. He looked at me. By saying, I accept, you have just legally purchased the entirety of the asset known as Valmont Holdings. Valmont Holdings, Serafina asked, her voice trembling slightly. What is that? Valmont Holdings, Elias explained, his voice ringing with cold precision, is the parent company that owns 100% of Arthur Valmont's assets. It owns this tower. It owns the Valmont Hotel Group. It owns the shipping fleets in the Pacific. It owns the patent portfolio for green energy tech. It owns everything. He paused for effect. The current market valuation of Valmont Holdings is approximately $2 billion. The silence that followed was not the silence of a library. It was the silence of a vacuum, as if all the air had been sucked out of the room into the cold Seattle sky. My father's face went from red to a ghostly, sickly white. His mouth opened and closed like a fish on a dock. But no sound came out. My mother gripped the edge of the table, her knuckles turning yellow. $2 billion, she whispered. That is impossible, Serafina screamed, jumping up. That is illegal. You cannot buy a billion-dollar company for $1. That is fraud. It is perfectly legal, Elias replied smoothly. It is a private contract. Mr. Valmont had the right to sell his company for whatever price he deemed fit, to whomever he chose. He chose to structure it as an option contract, triggered only by the person who treated him with humanity when he had nothing to offer but a piece of dirty paper. Elias turned the leather-bound document toward me and uncapped a heavy fountain pen. Sign here, Miss Treadwell, he said, as the sole owner and chairwoman of the board. My hand did not shake. I picked up the pen. The weight of it felt good. It felt like justice. You cannot do this, my father roared, lunging forward. Faith, do not sign that. We are a family, that money belongs to all of us. You have to share it. We raised you. Sit down, Mr. Treadwell, Elias barked. The security guards took a step forward, their hands hovering over their belts. My father collapsed back into his chair, looking like he was having a heart attack. I looked at them. I looked at Serafina, who was clutching her $1 million check as if it were a life raft, not realizing she was already drowning. I looked at my mother, whose eyes were darting around the room, calculating, scheming, trying to find a way to spin this. "You laughed," I said softly. They looked at me. "You laughed when I got the $1, I continued. "You mocked me. You told me I was worth less than a pack of gum. You told me I should be a maid." I looked down at the paper. "You were right about one thing. Mother, Arthur knew exactly who had value." I pressed the pen to the paper. The ink flowed dark and permanent. Faith Treadwell. "It is done," Elias announced. "Congratulations, Miss Treadwell, or should I say, Ms. Valmont. You are now the wealthiest woman in this room, and quite possibly in the state." "No," Serafina whimpered. "No, no, no. I have $1 million. I am rich too. I am still rich." Elias turned his gaze to my sister. It was a look of profound pity mixed with professional detachment. "Ah, yes," Elias said. "The $1 million. We should discuss that." "Discuss what?" Serafina snapped, her voice shrill with panic. "I signed for it. It is mine." "Yes, you did sign for it," Elias agreed. "You signed the beneficiary acceptance form for the liquid asset trust, but you did not read Clause 4, subsection B. I didn't have to read it," Serafina stammered. "It was just a receipt." "It was not a receipt," Elias said. "It was an assumption of liability." My father looked up, his eyes wide with horror. "Liability? What liability?" "The Black Trust," Elias said. The words hung in the air like smoke. I watched them. I watched the realization dawning on their faces like a slow, terrible sunrise. They had walked into the room thinking they were the predators. They had feasted on the carcass of a man they thought was defenseless, but Arthur Valmont had been hunting them from the grave. And I was no longer the bait. I was the one holding the leash. "Faith," my mother whispered, her voice trembling. "Faith, honey, what is he talking about?" I leaned back in the massive leather chair at the head of the table. It was comfortable. It fit me perfectly. "I think," I said, looking at Elias, "that you should explain to my sister exactly what she just bought for $1 million. "This is insane," my father screamed, his face turning a shade of purple that looked dangerous for a man of his age and cholesterol levels. He slammed his hand onto the table, rattling the crystal water pitcher. "You are twisting everything math is math. You crook. Faith has a $1 bill. Sarah has a check for $1 million. In what universe is one bigger than a million? You are trying to steal from us because you are in bed with her." He pointed a shaking finger at me, accusing Elias and me of conspiracy. Elias Thorne did not flinch. He did not raise his voice. He simply opened the blue folder that Serafina had signed so eagerly just minutes before. He smoothed the paper flat, revealing the signature that was still wet with ink. "Mr. Treadwell," Elias said, his voice ice-cold. "If you had ever bothered to read a contract in your life, you might not be living in a rented house, but since you refuse to read this one, allow me to summarize." He turned the document so my father could see the bold header at the top of the page. "This is the deed of transfer for the Arthur Valmont Distressed Asset Fund," Elias explained. "Internally, we call it the Black Trust." "Trusts?" My mother perked up, recovering slightly from her shock. "Trust funds are good. Trust funds mean money." "Not this one," Elias said. "Arthur was a brilliant businessman, but he was also a man who believed in balance. For every asset, there is a liability. For every win, a loss. Over the last 40 years, Arthur accumulated certain toxic assets, failed real estate ventures in Florida, unsettled lawsuits from the mining operations in the 90s, personal guarantees on loans for companies that went bankrupt, Serafina lowered her $1 million check. Her hands were starting to tremble. What are you talking about? Most billionaires write these debts off, Elias continued, looking directly at my sister. They declare bankruptcy on the shell companies and walk away, but Arthur kept them. He bundled them all together into a single financial entity. He kept them alive, paying the minimum interest, nurturing them like poisonous plants in a greenhouse. He tapped the document Serafina had signed. The $1 million you received was the liquidity injection required to take over the management of this fund. It was the bait. Bait? Serafina whispered. By accepting the $1 million, Elias said, you also accepted full personal liability for the debts held within the Black Trust. You pierced the corporate veil. You agreed to back these debts with your own name, your own assets, and your own future earnings. How much? My father asked. His voice was a rasp. All the bluster was gone. How much debt is in there? Elias adjusted his glasses. The current outstanding principal, plus accrued interest and legal penalties, stands at roughly $15 million. The silence in the room was heavier than a tombstone. 15 million, Serafina squeaked. Correct, Elias said. So, if we take your asset of $1 million and subtract the liability of $15 million, your current net worth, as of the moment you signed that paper, is negative $14 million. My mother did not scream. She did not cry. She simply rolled her eyes back in her head and slid gracefully out of her chair. Collapsing onto the Persian rug in a heap of faux fur and gold chains, it was a feint so perfect it looked rehearsed. But for once, I think the sheer horror might have been genuine. Mom! Serafina shrieked, but she did not move to help her. She looked at the check in her hand as if it were a burning coal. I don't want it, she yelled. Take it back. I don't want the money. She ripped the check in half, then in quarters. She threw the confetti-like pieces at Elias. There, she screamed, hysterical tears streaming down her face, ruining her makeup. I tore it up. It is void. I didn't take the money. The deal is off. Elias watched the pieces of paper flutter down to the table with a look of mild boredom. He did not brush them away. That was a dramatic gesture, Miss Treadwell, he said calmly, but legally meaningless. You signed the contract. The transfer of liability happened the moment the ink touched the page. Destroying the cashier's check only means you have lost your only means of making the first interest payment. I can issue a stop payment on it if you like, but that will just leave you $15 million in the hole with zero cash on hand. No, my father roared. He rushed to the table and started trying to tape the pieces of the check back together with shaking hands. Don't listen to her. We keep the million. We can fix this. We can declare bankruptcy. She can try, Elias noted, but fraud debts are rarely dischargeable in bankruptcy court, and since she signed an affidavit stating she was a sophisticated investor who understood the risks, which she did, right there in paragraph 3 it will be very hard to convince a judge she was a victim. I watched them. I watched my father on his knees, scrambling for scraps of paper. I watched my sister sobbing into her hands, her dreams of a Porsche dissolving into a nightmare of debt collectors and court dates. I watched my mother lying on the floor, choosing unconsciousness over reality. It was brutal, it was cruel, and it was exactly what they deserved. But there was one final piece of the puzzle, one final twist of the knife that Arthur had prepared. Who do I owe? Serafina sobbed, looking up at Elias. Who holds the debt? Is it a bank? Maybe we can negotiate. Maybe I can do an Instagram campaign for them. Elias smiled. It was a shark smile. The Black Trust owes its money to a primary creditor, Elias said. The entity that loaned the money to cover those bad debts over the years is the parent company. He turned to me. The creditor is Valmont Holdings. My father stopped taping the check. He looked up slowly. Serafina froze. Valmont Holdings, Elias repeated, which, as of 5 minutes ago, is solely owned by Miss Faith Treadwell. The realization hit them like a physical wave. The air left the room. You, Serafina whispered. I owe you. Yes, I said. My voice was calm, steady, echoing in the quiet library. You owe me $15 million, Sarah, and I expect to be paid. My father looked at me with a mixture of terror and disbelief. Faith, honey, you wouldn't. We are your family. You are my debtors, I corrected him. And I am your creditor. The dynamic has changed. I looked at Elias. Is everything in order? Completely, Elias said. He reached into the wooden box one last time. He pulled out a heavy object wrapped in velvet. He unwrapped it and placed it in front of me. It was a seal, a heavy brass corporate seal with the Valmont crest, a lion holding a key. It was the symbol of ultimate authority within the empire. This is the seal of the chairman, Elias said formally. It gives you the power to seize assets, freeze accounts, and authorize legal action against any entity that owes Valmont Holdings money. I reached out and took the seal. It was cold and heavy in my hand. It felt like a gavel. It felt like a weapon. My mother groaned from the floor, blinking her eyes open. What happened? She moaned. Did we win? No, Mother, I said. Standing up, I towered over them now. Not because I was tall, but because they had made themselves so small. I won. I looked down at my sister, who was shrinking into her chair, looking smaller and younger than I had ever seen her. The arrogance was gone. The cruelty was gone. All that was left was fear. Get up, Mom, I said coldly. We have business to discuss, and I charge interest by the minute. The silence that had filled the library only moments ago was replaced by a cacophony of desperation that was far more pathetic than their earlier arrogance. My mother, who had been lying on the floor in a faint that would have won her a daytime Emmy, miraculously recovered the moment I mentioned charging interest. She scrambled to her knees, not to stand up, but to shuffle toward me, grasping at the hem of my suit jacket with manicured claws. Faith, baby, listen to me, she gasped, her eyes wide and frantic. You are taking this all wrong. You are the big sister. You have always been the responsible one. You cannot let Serafina be ruined. She is just a child. My father was right beside her, his face a mask of sweaty, terrifying sincerity. He reached out to touch my arm, but the security guard stepped forward, and my father recoiled as if burned. Faith, honey, we were just joking, he stammered, his voice pitching up an octave. You know our sense of humor, the Treadwell sarcasm. We were just testing you. Yes, that is it. We were testing you to see if you had the grit to handle the real world. And look at you. You passed. You are a tiger. We are so proud of you. Proud, I repeated, looking down at them. 5 minutes ago, you told me to buy a pack of gum and wait in the car. That was part of the test, Serafina sobbed, wiping snot and mascara across her cheeks with the back of her hand. She looked up at me, her face swollen and red. Please, Faith, we are sisters. We shared a room. I cannot owe $15 million. I will go to jail. My life will be over before it even starts. You should have thought about that before you signed a document you did not read, I said calmly, or before you spent years treating me like an ATM. We are family, my mother wailed, pulling herself up to clutch at the edge of the mahogany table. Doesn't that mean anything to you? Family forgives, family helps. I looked at them. I looked at the people who had raised me, and I felt absolutely nothing. No anger, no sadness, just a cold, clinical detachment. It was as if I was looking at strangers, or perhaps at a bad investment I was finally liquidating. Elias, I said, not taking my eyes off my parents. Give me the blue file, the one from the forensic accountant. Elias slid a thin blue folder across the table. I opened it. Inside were rows of bank statements and transfer records, highlighted in neon yellow. You talk about family, I said, my voice quiet but cutting through their sobbing. Let us talk about what you did to your family for the last 5 years. I pulled out a sheet of paper. Item 1, I read. 3 years ago, My savings account was drained of $4,000. You told me it was identity theft. You told me the bank made an error and I just had to wait. I turned the paper around so they could see the transfer log. It was transferred to a verified account under the name Richard Treadwell. You stole my car fund to pay for the down payment on Serafina's convertible. My father's mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. Item 2, I continued, flipping the page. Last year, when I was working double shifts during the holidays to save for a deposit on an apartment, $2,000 disappeared. You told me I must have been hacked. I pointed to the highlighted line. It went to a clinic in Beverly Hills, Botox and fillers for Lydia Treadwell. My mother turned pale, her hand going instinctively to her forehead. You have been stealing from me for years, I said, closing the file with a soft slap. You did not just treat me like a servant, you treated me like a victim. You stole my labor, my time, and my actual money. And you did it while smiling to my face. We needed it, my mother whispered, her voice trembling. Appearance is everything. Faith, you know that. We had to keep up appearances. And now the bill has come due, I said. I stood up and walked around the table until I was standing directly in front of Serafina. She flinched, curling into a ball in her chair. I have the power to seize everything you own, I said. I could take the cars, the jewelry, the furniture. I could garnish your wages for the rest of your life. I could put a line on every breath you take. Please, Serafina whimpered. Please don't. But I am not you, I said. I do not destroy people for sport. I do it for business. I signaled to Elias. He pulled 3 documents from his briefcase and laid them out on the table. I am offering you a settlement, I announced. I will not wipe the debt. $15 million is too much money to just vanish, but I will restructure it. I will hold the debt in abeyance, meaning I will not collect on it as long as you agree to 3 non-negotiable conditions. Anything, my father cried. We will do anything. Do not be so quick to agree, I warned him. Read the terms. I pointed to the first document. Condition 1, I said. Restitution for theft. You will sign over the deed to the house in Bellevue to me, immediately. It will be payment for the money you stole from me, plus interest, plus emotional damages. The house, my mother shrieked. But where will we live? That is not my problem, I said. I hear the rental market is vibrant, or perhaps you can stay at a motel. I'm sure you can find one that charges by the hour. Condition 2, I continued, pointing to the second document, which was aimed at Serafina. You need to learn the value of $1, specifically, the value of labor. Serafina looked at the paper. It was an employment contract. Valmont Holdings owns a logistics center in Tacoma, I explained. It is a warehouse. We are short-staffed on the sorting line. You will work there, full-time, minimum wage. Your paycheck will be garnished 100% to pay down the interest on your debt. Warehouse, Serafina gasped, looking horrified. Like, manual labor. I cannot do that. I have bad knees. I am an influencer. Not anymore, I said. The contract forbids you from having any public social media presence while you are under my employment. If you post one selfie, if you tweet one complaint, the deal is void, and I seize the $15 million immediately. You are a monster, Serafina screamed. You are jealous and ugly, and you are trying to ruin me. I am giving you a job, I said coldly. Something you have never had. Take it or leave it. Condition 3, I said, placing my hand on the final document. This is a restraining order and a non-disclosure agreement. I looked at my parents. If you sign this, you agree that we are no longer family. You will not call me. You will not text me. You will not come to my hotel. You will not tell the press you know me. To the world, and to me, you are simply debtors. I am your creditor. That is the only relationship we will ever have. Faith, you cannot mean that, my father said, tears streaming down his face. We are your parents. You fired your daughter years ago, I said. I am just making the paperwork official. I uncapped the pen and set it down on the table. "You have 5 minutes to sign," I said, checking the Rolex on Elias's wrist. After that, I instructed Mr. Thorne to file the lawsuit for immediate repayment of the full $15 million. The room descended into chaos. They screamed. They cursed. My mother called me a cold-blooded snake. My father called me an ungrateful wretch. Serafina threw the pen across the room and had to go pick it up. They hated me. The hatred radiated off them in waves, hot and toxic, but their fear was stronger. My father was the first to break. He realized that without the house, he was homeless, but without the deal, he was in federal prison for fraud. He grabbed the pen and signed the deed transfer, his hand shaking so hard he tore the paper. My mother followed, sobbing uncontrollably as she signed away her rights to contact me. Serafina held out the longest. She stared at the employment contract for the warehouse job as if it were a death sentence. "I hate you," she hissed at me. "I will hate you forever." "That is fine," I said. "Just make sure you are on time for the morning shift. The supervisor does not tolerate tardiness." She signed. Elias gathered the papers instantly, checking the signatures with a professional eye. He nodded to me. "The contracts are valid," he said. He handed me the final document. It was the assumption of control for Valmont Holdings. It was the paper that officially seated me on the throne. I took the pen. I did not hesitate. I did not look at my weeping, broken family. I thought of the old man in the rain. I thought of the dollar bill in my pocket. I thought of the girl who had spent 28 years trying to buy love that was not for sale. I signed my name. The stroke of the pen felt like a blade cutting a rope. "Get them out of here," I said to the security guards. "Faith," my mother screamed as the guards moved in. "Faith, wait." "Ms. Valmont," I corrected her, not even looking up as I organized my new files. "Goodbye." The doors closed, cutting off their wails. For the first time in my life, the silence was absolute, and it was beautiful. The descent from the 72nd floor felt different than the ride up. On the way up, I had been a nervous concierge in a cheap suit, clutching a secret in my pocket. On the way down, the elevator felt like a chariot. The silence was not heavy. It was respectful. Beside me, Elias Thorne stood with his hands clasped behind his back, looking satisfied, while the security team flanked us like a Praetorian guard. When the polished steel doors slid open in the lobby, the shift in atmosphere was palpable. The staff, who had barely glanced at me when I entered, now stopped what they were doing. Word travels fast in a building like this. They knew. The receptionist stood up straight. The security chief nodded deferentially. I walked across the marble floor not with the hurried steps of someone trying to avoid trouble, but with the measured pace of someone who owned the very ground beneath her feet. We stepped out through the revolving doors and into the air. For the first time in weeks, the relentless Seattle gray had broken. The storm had passed, leaving behind a sky of brilliant, washed-out blue. The sun reflected off the wet pavement, turning the puddles into pools of liquid light. It felt like the city itself was taking a deep breath, but the scene on the sidewalk was far less peaceful. My family was there, huddled together near a concrete bollard like castaways on a hostile island. They had been escorted out the service entrance, stripped of the dignity they prized so highly. My mother was clutching her faux fur coat as if it were a life preserver. My father was arguing with a security guard, who was shaking his head with the bored expression of a man who had heard it all before. And then there was Serafina. She was screaming into her phone, her voice cracking with hysteria. "What do you mean, you are canceling the order?" she shrieked. "I have the money I signed for it. You cannot just take the car back. It is Miami Blue. It is my brand." She lowered the phone slowly, her face crumbling as the person on the other end, likely the dealership manager who had just received a call from Elias's office, delivered the news. The Porsche was not coming. There would be no victory lap. There would be no photos for her followers. The $1 million fantasy had evaporated, leaving her with nothing but a $15 million anchor around her neck. She looked up and saw me. For a moment, I thought she would scream. I thought she would rush at me, claws out, fueled by the rage that had always sustained her, but she did not move. She looked at me, and for the first time in 24 years, she did not look down on me. She looked up, terrified, realizing that the sister she had mocked was now the architect of her entire future. A long, sleek shadow pulled up to the curb, blocking their view of me. It was a Rolls-Royce Phantom, painted a deep, midnight blue that looked black until the light hit it. It was massive, silent, and radiated authority. This was Arthur Valmont's car, my car, the driver, a man with graying hair and a uniform that was pressed to perfection, stepped out. He walked around the vehicle and opened the rear door. He did not look at my parents. He did not look at the crying girl on the curb. He looked only at me. "Good afternoon, Ms. Valmont," he said. His voice was warm, genuine. "My name is Henry. Your grandfather spoke of you often, though he said he had not met you yet. He said he was saving this car for the woman who understood the value of a warm seat." I felt a lump form in my throat, but I swallowed it down. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the old, crumpled dollar bill. I smoothed it out one last time. It was dirty. It was tattered. It was the most beautiful thing I had ever owned. I did not put it in my wallet. I slipped it into the breast pocket of my jacket, directly over my heart. It would stay there. It was my compass. As long as I could feel the texture of that cheap paper against my chest, I would never become like them. I would never mistake price for value. I turned to look at my family one last time. My mother saw the car. She saw the driver bowing. She saw the way the sunlight hit the Valmont pin on my lapel. She took a step forward, her mouth opening, likely to launch into another plea, another manipulation, another appeal to a love she had never nurtured. "Faith," she whispered, her voice carrying across the sidewalk. "Baby, please." I looked at her. I looked at my father, who was staring at his shoes. I looked at Serafina, who was wiping her nose on her sleeve. I waited for the anger to come. I waited for the urge to yell at them, to list every birthday they missed, every insult they hurled, every dollar they stole. But there was nothing. The fire had burned out, leaving only ash. They were not monsters. They were not villains. They were just small, sad people who had spent their lives chasing a reflection in a mirror, never realizing the glass was empty. I did not speak to them. I did not wave. I simply looked through them, as if they were part of the scenery, no more important than the fire hydrant or the lamppost. I turned back to the car. "Where to, Ms. Valmont?" Henry asked, standing ready. I smiled. It was not a smile of revenge. It was a smile of liberation. "Take me to the Sterling Hotel." "Henry," I said clearly. "The Sterling?" he asked, surprised. "Do you have a reservation?" "No," I said, stepping into the plush leather interior of the car. "I work there, or rather, I used to. I need to go in and hand in my resignation." I paused, thinking of Kevin the bellman, of the housekeeping staff who worked until their backs broke, of the servers who took abuse from people like my sister every single day. "And Henry," I added, "stop at the bank on the way. I need to make a withdrawal. I want to give every employee on the shift today a farewell tip." "Very good, ma'am," Henry smiled. "How much shall we prepare?" $10,000 each, I said. Henry's eyebrows shot up, but his smile only widened. "A very generous gesture, Ms. Valmont. Your grandfather would have approved." "It is just money, Henry," I said as I settled back into the seat. "It only matters if you use it to warm someone up." The heavy door closed with a solid, reassuring thud, sealing out the noise of the city. As the car pulled away from the curb, gliding silently into the traffic, I looked into the rearview mirror. I saw 3 small figures standing on the sidewalk, shrinking rapidly as we accelerated. They looked lost. They looked confused. And then, as we turned the corner, they disappeared completely. I did not look back again. I looked forward, through the windshield, at the open road, and the bright blue sky that stretched out over the city of Seattle. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with air that finally felt like my own. I touched the pocket over my heart. They had spent their lives worshiping the numbers on a bank statement, thinking that wealth was a scorecard. They never understood the lesson Arthur had spent 80 years trying to teach. Value is not the number printed on the check. It is the character of the person holding the pen. Thank you so much for listening to this story. Please let me know in the comments where you are tuning in from. I would love to hear your thoughts. Don't forget to subscribe to Veronica Revenge Stories, like this video, and hit the hype button so more people can hear this story.